Perhaps the most famous of all the Psalms, Tehillim chapter 23, Parakhaf Gimel. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. Here we have this idea, which we see many times in the Torah, the idea of the shepherd leading his flock. We have many midrashim that talk about things like God chose Abraham as his beginning of leader, first of the Jews, and Moshe later is the first of the Jews because they were shepherds. They knew how to lead. They knew how to protect their flock. When Moshe asks God who's going to succeed him, he doesn't want Bnei Israel to be like Kitson Asher Ein Lahem Ro'eh, as a flock that does not have a sheep, flock that does not have sheep, a flock that does not have a shepherd. So here the idea that God is the shepherd, and therefore I, the Mishorer, David will say, I lack nothing. Bin ot deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Why is it that I, the sheep in this metaphor, in this image, lacks nothing? Why? Because the shepherd lies me down in green pastures. He leads me to waters. He leads me to places where I can drink, where I can eat, where I can relax, where I can live a decent, good, enjoyable life. That's what God gives to the sheep. That's what God gives to human beings. So again, here, God, the shepherd, the protector, God is the one who is leading the people. Nafshi yeshoveh. Yancheni v'ma'agle tzedek l'ma'an shemo. He renews my life. He brings back, right? The sheep is walking, traversing miles, running, or whatever it does, all over the hills and the crags and the rocks. And what happens is the shepherd brings him to the water. The shepherd brings him back to the lush pasture. The shepherd, God, guides us. He renews our life. He guides me in the proper paths, as befits his name. It's an interesting phrase, this lema'an shemo, as befits his name, or which sort of increases his name or reputation, if you want to say as such. It's not something that we see, sort of very often. People that like a shepherd will treat their sheep correctly so that people will say, oh, that guy's a great shepherd. That's not usually the reason, but here, in a world in which so many people doubt God, doubt that there is a God, doubt that God really cares, this idea of God's leading of the Jewish people, or people in general, I should say, not just the Jewish people, in order to give them everything they need, like we'll say later in a different way, that, right, you open up your hands and God provides for everything, for all creatures in this world. This idea of God's leading the people is something that brings a sense of that increases God's reputation. Now, life is not all just lush pastures and beautiful streams of water. Pasuk Daled, Gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo irara ki atai madi, shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Even as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. My English here says the deepest darkness, shadow of death, depends upon, we joked the other day before we were doing this chapter, which rapper, which musician, which singer, which poet you're using their translation, right? But even when I'm walking through darkness, life is not all just lush pastures. It's not all just beautiful valleys. There's also times of great difficulty. The poet here says, I am not scared. Why? Because God is with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So as the rod and the staff comfort me because they protect me, presumably. They protect me from, wolves or lions or whatever it is in this parable of the sheep. Is it that, as others have said, that at times, human beings get a little bit of a potch from God, and a potch sometimes, not too hard, not too aggressive, is supposed to help people. Same way sometimes you have to tell your kids, that's not the right thing to do. That's, you don't want to run into the little middle of the street, you're told. So different ways of understanding that verse, shiftecha, mishantecha, your rod and your staff. Interestingly, this word salmavet earlier in the verse, gam kelech begeit salmavet, really should probably be pronounced salmut, like malchut. And there are those who say that it sort of was changed to be Tsal Mavet, to make it look like the shadow of death. Even as I walk through the valley of the shadow, Tsal is a shadow of Mavet, of death. So really, it's grammatically it should be read at Salmut, presumably like the Hebrew word malchut for kingdom, but maybe got changed to at some point to reflect that idea of the shadow of death. So that's the first. The first part of this psalm is the mashal, the parable, the image of God as the shepherd, leading the sheep, protecting them, bringing them to the places that they want, bringing them to the places that they need, even when your things look dark. That's not where God ultimately brings you other places to restore your soul. The second part of this psalm, which begins now in verse 5 in Pasuk, has a different image. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, dishanta vashemen roshi kosi rivaya. God spreads a table in front of me in full view of my enemy. And my enemies are there, but there's nothing that they can do to me. They cannot harm me in any way, shape, or form. God spreads the table in front of me. I'm having a picnic in the park with all the enemies around, and there's nothing that they can do. I'm sitting here in the castle. They want me. This doesn't matter. God is protecting me. Julian Assange or something, right? Will he ever be sent back to the United States or not? Now, this is not, about him, but right, diplomacy, sitting in the consulate, in the American embassy, where their quote unquote enemies, whatever you want to put them, can't get you. God provides, and here now this person is in God's house, or you could say God is in his house, and God has set the table in front of him, and the enemies, there's nothing you can do about it. God places oil on his head. You can understand this as being David, who had oil poured on his head, anointed with oil as the king of Israel, just like his predecessor Shaul was, just as his son and successor Shlomo was, and just as kings and Kohanim were. It's a sign of respect and honor and love. And my cup runneth over, because God, right, I have more than I could have ever desired, being here at the table with God. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. Only good things and kindness will I pursue or will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of God for many long years, for all time. Right, the person, this is sort of the opposite. And the last psalm was a psalm of somebody who was terrified, a person who was scared, back in Kapitel Chaf Bet, who was, everything around them was hard, was evil, was difficult all over the place. It was, don't be far away from me, God. I'm just a worm. We trusted in you. I call out to you and you don't answer. You seem so far away. That was the last psalm. This psalm was the opposite. This is not somebody who is in a terrible state. Maybe it's the same person when things have gotten better, when they saw maybe that, there was a reason why. It's hard to understand the difficulties. Everybody goes through difficulties during their life, but now they have left those difficulties behind with the full understanding that no matter where they are in life, that God is with them. Think about the life of David. David's not a sheep, but David was on the run in his life multiple times, from Shaul, from his the rebellion of his son Avshalom, and David still believed that God was with him, that God was together with him, even though he was on his run. If you remember during those chapters, Shimi ben Gera, a relative of Shaul, comes out and curses David and his warriors, Yoav, and his brothers, who were very quick to violence, always want to kill him. And David says, no, this is how God wants to punish me, by embarrassing me, by being publicly scolded and chided. Then let it be, let me accept this. David runs away, but he knows that God is with him even through those difficulties. And of course, David does come back, sits back at his table, sits back at his throne, sits back at his kingdom, and thus we can understand as his life that he was Shavti b'Beit Hashem la'orech yamim, that he then lived in the house of God for all of his days. So a psalm not from the sadness, not from the difficulty, but one that shows the appreciation and the knowledge that God is with us no matter where we are during the struggles or the good times, the regular vicissitudes of life that we all experience.